Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Chris Townsend, the Area Vice President for Federal Sales at UiPath. Chris, before break, we're talking about how RPA has really grown over the last 18 months or 2 years in the government, how agencies are using it. They're starting to move to the mission area. I imagine employees also are starting to embrace RPA. They're really starting to, as they see the value in it, they're saying, hey, this is not so scary.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. Initially, and we talk about this all the time, this is not a technology that's going to replace jobs, right? It's going to offload a lot of the mundane, boring tasks. It really ends up improving job satisfaction. People get excited about it. And it's also creating a whole new segment of employment, and we're seeing that within federal. So one of the things that our CEO, the company did about a year and a half ago, was part of the Department of Labor initiative, the pledge to the American workers to create new jobs. We've committed to create 750,000 new jobs as a result of RPA and automation, and we're well down that road and reskilling and retraining. We're doing a lot of that within the federal government. In fact, USDA has a reskilling program. They're on their second round of classes now, where they're taking folks out of other segments in the organization and retraining them on this technology. One of the really neat things about RPAs, it's very intuitive. You don't need to be a IT developer to be able to build these automations. In fact, some of the most effective folks in building these automations are the folks that are not IT, that are actually administering the workflows. I had to share that VA example before. One of the folks that built that first automation to be able to process the inbound patient records was a registered nurse. Right now, she did have some IT background and engineering background as well, but we've got folks at GSA, I think upwards of 40 people now that don't have IT backgrounds that are writing automations that are administering the workflows, because those folks know the process that needs to be corrected and where RPA can be applied. But yeah, we're really seeing this as we get it rolled out, that the employees love the technology. It offloads a lot of the mundane, repetitive work. It empowers them to automate segments of their day-to-day job that they just don't like doing. And you really look at it more as a digital assistant rather than a robot that's replacing an employee.
I think we all could use a digital assistant sometimes. So I think that's a pretty good way to put it, and keeps people understanding about what this really is versus what the robots are taking our job analogy that we hear way too often. One of the things that comes up as part of this is this idea of citizen development. Do citizens play a role, or can they play a role when it comes to agencies and RPA? Is it just a user role? Is it more than that?
Yeah, it's the fastest growing segment of our business, Jason, is the whole idea of citizen development. And again, going kind of back to that digital assistant thinking, if you roll this out on every desktop in the organization, and it just becomes a tool that you have available to you every day to be able to automate part of your work stream. And then if you develop an automation that's got broad application across your organization, you send it up and have it published and refined and send out to everybody in the organization, the ROI becomes extremely compelling, very quickly. So if you take a 50,000 employee government agency and save 5 minutes a day for each employee, it's tens of millions of dollars a year in savings. Just 5 minutes a day. You automate one task that saves an employee 5 minutes a day. In a 50,000 person agency, it's an 8-figure annual productivity improvement. And again, we're just scratching the surface on what we can do there. But we have a number of agencies and also large non-federal customers that are moving all in with citizen development.
Maybe describe a little more what you mean by citizen development. Is it the idea that you put out a piece of software, like an RPA piece of software, and then citizens can use it, or they can add to it, or is it an open source type thing?
Yeah, great question. So it's really all of the above. So essentially, you have the ability to write an automation for something that is a boring task that you have to do every day. So being in sales, I have to do expense reports, right? You can write an automation to automate your expense report processing. Any kind of mundane tasks that you have to do every day. I was talking to one of the agencies, and they had employees that spent 3 hours a day just opening emails, taking information from an email and loading it into another system. They were able to automate that entire process and save 3 hours per employee per day at 1,500 employees. The return on investment becomes significant, and it gives those employees 3 hours a day back to be able to better service, again, the constituents of the agency. But the idea is that the folks that can identify what needs to be automated are the folks that are administering these processes every day. And if you have this digital assistant on your machine and you identify, hey, I'm going to automate this process, and then you say, well, hey, everybody in the organization may have this process, and you develop a couple of steps, you build an automation, it's very intuitive, it's easy to use. We just came out with an even more intuitive way to do it called Studio X. Then you can take that automation that you've developed, send it up to your robotic operations center, your center of excellence. You can have your more advanced developers look at it, refine it, and then push it out to everybody in the organization. It just pops up on a tray in your desktop. So now, let's say I've developed an automation to automate the processing of my expense reports, save myself, half an hour a week, whatever it is. I can send that up, they refine it, they push it out to everybody in the organization, then everyone in the organization just clicks a play button and runs that automation, and it's available. So now I've just saved everybody in the organization of my same job role that same 30 minutes a week. And that really begins to build on itself.
I may need to talk to you after we're done here about that expense report piece of software. That is definitely the bane of my existence. Chris, I want to also bring up this idea that something that Gartner has talked about, hyper automation. Why don't you define what that is and then how that plays into this broader discussion about RPA?
Yeah, so hyper automation is taking automation and integrating it into everything that we do, right? So it's tying it into all of your applications, all of your systems, and making automation essentially ubiquitous across your IT environment. So what we're seeing, this rapid adoption and acceleration of the RPA technology, is really implementing it as a platform across the organization. Using we have some capabilities that we've added that allows you to identify processes that are ripe for automation. So we have a process mining tool, we have a task mining tool that can look at the day-to-day tasks you do and where would automation fit to be able to automate processes and save time. But then it's more than that, right? How do we tie into your digital modernization strategy? How do we tie into your maybe you're moving from an on-prem help desk to ServiceNow, and how to help you automate that process? But automation then starts to become ubiquitous into all of your IT and business process efforts. That's really what we're talking about when we talk about hyper automation.
The tools, I think, are key to this, because a lot of agencies probably feel like, well, where do I start? How do I choose? Yeah, there's a lot of these. I have so many. I mean, I remember hearing GSA CFO Gerard Barak talk about this, and once they got started, they had 100 or 200 different processes that people brought forward to say, hey, let's do this. Does the tools also rank in order or prioritize, or hey, based on estimates of the tool, you could save 5 hours from this, but 20 hours from that? Did you get any sense of how to kind of prioritize that?
Yeah, that's one of the most exciting things about this technology. Is every time I go and meet with one of our customers, they want to show me some new automation that they built for some other segment of their business, whether it's IT or mission. And that's why, we're just on the cusp of what this technology is going to look like, because there's so much excitement about it. But we have rolled out some tools that allow you to measure the ROI of the automations that you built to help with prioritization. And frankly, Jason, that was one of the biggest challenges that I saw when I joined UiPath almost a year ago, is the application of the technology is so broad. Our sales team, our partners, our customers all needed to think about how to use this and prioritize where to start, right? So let's start with some automations that can have the largest impact to the organization in terms of cost avoidance or improved productivity, and have the lowest barrier of complexity to build those automations, and we can roll them out quickly, right? So you look at those three elements to help you prioritize. Where can we have the biggest impact with the lowest complexity in the shortest period of time? Focus on those. And we've built a lot of use cases and solution documents around that to help guide our customers and partners on where to deploy these applications. But you're right. Once we get these automations up and running, we get a center of excellence stood up where we have an operations approach and a governance model. Then it really starts to take off, because other folks in the organization see where they can apply this. And essentially, our center of excellence has a process where people apply to say, hey, I want to automate this process. Our what we call our automation hub allows you to stack rank that in terms of complexity to build and return on investment, so you can prioritize where you focus. But the biggest problem that we see with our customers now that have really gone all in with automation is keeping up with all the automation ideas that are coming from the organization, which again is just a really exciting place to be. And it's great to see because all these automations are driving efficiencies and improve morale and improve employee satisfaction.
There's a concern when you talk about cloud computing, cloud, scope creep, cloud creep, too much cloud, too many different clouds that don't talk to each other. Is that also a concern with automation? Is that I'll automate something and then you'll automate something and then another part will automate something, and really we're all doing the same thing over and over again? Does this tool and is there a way to make sure agencies don't kind of just have these silos of automation?
Absolutely. So one of the most important things you do when you decide to roll out automation at the enterprise level, the platform level, is that you have a center of excellence or robotic process automation center. And what that allows you to do is it gives you the tools, the enterprise management capability. And I think that's one of the great things that UiPath did early on, was really build an enterprise management platform that can help scale and manage the automations across very, very large, complex enterprises. So by doing that, and you build a sound operational approach and a automation operating model with strict governance around it, and you roll this out as an enterprise platform, you prevent all of that, redundancy and building automations on top of automations or redundant automations in the organization. But it's one of the most important things you do when you roll this out at enterprise scale is have that automation operating model defined, follow the best practices. And again, it was great to see GSA put out their RPA best practices playbook, and then also have a robust governance model. We have a lot of partners that can help our customers build that best practices governance approach.
Chris, this has been a fascinating conversation. We're just about out of time. Before I let you go, what's the biggest barrier? What's the biggest pothole? What's the takeaway, if you will, even from our conversation today, that agencies should keep in mind as they continue down this path? Again, we always say no agencies at 0, no agencies at 100. They're all somewhere on the spectrum. But there's always, is there a common mistake, pothole that you're seeing?
Yeah, the challenge that we're seeing in government, Jason, we're seeing this all the time, is this technology can solve mission problems that you don't necessarily think about bringing an IT solution to right away. And the challenge that we have in Fed is the way that the IT budget or budget is appropriated across government is, if you have a mission problem you're trying to solve and you allocate those dollars to the mission side of the house, it's not easy to move them over to IT if you're bringing an IT solution that to solve the problem. So what we're seeing is a lot of our functional areas, whether it's the healthcare side of VA or the CFO organization, IRS, or other non-IT segments that can really see some efficiencies and benefit of this technology, look to IT to deploy it, operate it, maintain it, but IT doesn't have it in their budget. So the biggest challenge right now is how to make sure that IT is getting the funding they need to be able to support this technology and across all those functional areas in the agencies. And it's a good problem to have, but it's also very frustrating for our customers because it puts our IT organizations in a tough spot too. If you've got 4 or 5 functional areas that are focused on the mission, that see the value of the technology, and they come back to IT and say, hey, look, we want to roll this stuff out, and IT doesn't have the funding or the resources, they can't then serve their constituents and their customer, and it makes it challenging. So we're working through that. I think that's more of a timing and maturation thing than anything else, but that's the biggest problem we have today.
We're on the cusp of Congress finishing up the 2021 budget and agencies putting forward their 2022 budget requests. So hopefully all that's starting to get worked into those requests. Chris, unfortunately, we are out of time for today. This has just, again, been a fascinating conversation. So let me thank my guest, Chris Townsend, the Area Vice President for Federal Sales at UiPath. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it, Jason.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.